In 2014, as you see, a number of us from Christ Church took a trip sponsored by Educational Opportunities, or EO, called the Footsteps of Paul, where we took a trip on Norwegian jade, much more luxurious than anything Paul ever traveled on. But anyway, that's the way it went. So here's the group starting from Christ Church. And I think you could see my arrow. Of course, here I am. Jack Olwine went. Clarine went, and her friend Dorothy. Helen Howe, sorry. Went. And here's Paula Jameson. Elizabeth went. Jack brought his sister Betsy. And then Brenda had been in nursing school with Elizabeth way back when in Indiana, and they kept in touch, and they asked if they could come. And so Ray and came, and also Patty Weiser. So I think that was the group of 10 that went on this adventure. So we joined a larger group called the Green Bus, because that was the color of our bus. And here's the whole group of, I'm not sure how many people now, posed before the library at Ephesus. So anyway, I see Patty there, and there are others in there, but they're kind of hard to find. Anyway, so we landed in Rome after a flight across the Atlantic. We collected our luggage and were waiting for the bus to come to get us. And so we went on our way from Rome out through the Italian countryside, cloudy, but very beautiful. And then we came to the port of Rome, Civita Vecchia, I think is the way they would say it. And there's our ship there. Again, much bigger than anything Paul would ever have recognized. So we boarded it there and set off on our sail. Sunset that first day. And in the evening, we had a speaker. It was Dr. Mike Slaughter, who is a United Methodist minister. I think he's retired now, but I remember him telling his story that just out of seminary, he was assigned to a church outside of Dayton, Ohio, and the DS told him that he would probably have to close the church. And I heard him say he didn't listen too well, because he grew that into a mega church. And it's very similar to Adam Hamilton, who wrote our study book, who went to start a church in the Kansas City area, and they first used a funeral home, and to kind of counteract that, they called themselves the Church of the Resurrection, and it grew it into a larger church. Both of them have only had one church in their entire career. So Mike was very interesting and filled us in the evening on Paul and his travels. So here we are going through the Straits of Messina between Italy and the island of Sicily. And anyway, there we are. And a little rainbow there as we went progressing. We go ahead towards Greece, around Italy. And here's a shot of the ship. I don't think any of us used the slide, but it was available for people to do it. And so this is some of what the ship looked like. Very luxurious. They have tiles every night made into a different animal. This one appears to be an elephant, but it was a good trip. And here we are, November 14th, Katakolon, Greece, and we're going to go where the Olympics Games originated in this stop. So we get on the green bus. This is a minister, Methodist minister from Maryland. She had one more person than I did, and so they stuck her with being bus captain. I'm glad I didn't have another person, because that's quite a job to keep track of all those people and make sure they get back on the bus. So here we are. The bus is white, but there's a sign you see there that says green bus. And there are other white buses around, and you had to be real sure you were getting on the right color bus, because who knows where that other bus was going to take you if you got onto that. So here we are at Olympia, and we have a guide. We had local guides who were very knowledgeable and told us a lot about the places that we were seeing. Here's some signs there to museum, archaeological site and all. A lot of columns, a lot of foundations left. Here's some of our group listening to her. She always carried this flag so we could find her. And here's the Temple of Jupiter. And she told us that most of these temples had been transferred to becoming a Christian church. And invariably, what they did was close up the door on one side and open up a door on the other side. So now the church faced in the opposite direction, and they converted it into a church. Here we're coming to the Olympic field. Do you notice that arch there? That was from Roman days. And the Romans knew how to build this arch somehow standing together. I walked under it real fast, but it's still there. It's been there for centuries. So that Romans were masters in engineering and construction. So here's the field. Races were held, and that white stone across there is the finish line. And the people watching just sat on these grassy slopes over here and probably stood up when the race was on and then sat back down and did whatever they're going to do till the next one came. And so whoever was across this one first, of course, won. No timed photographic finishes or anything like that. This is in the museum, some of the different statues that they've taken out. And now we got back on the ship and having breakfast in the morning on the ship there out on the patio. I enjoyed doing that. And here's the route that we took. Olympia is over in this area. We went to Athens and then to Corinth in here. So again, I think we had the same guide again. She got back to us the next morning. And anyway, this is the Corinthian Canal, which was built many years ago, quite narrow, too narrow for most ships today. But in Paul's day, they would haul ships over the divide and save a lot of time. And then the sailors will go into Corinth, and that is the reputation that Corinth had, being a sailor's town. Anyway, I don't want to discourage the Navy or anything, but it does seem to be true. Now we're coming to the modern village of Corinth, but in the excavation was abandoned a couple of hundred years ago, and the archaeologists have been able to go in and have a field day. And so there are old temples and things there. And this is where Paul spent several years in his ministry. In Acts 18, we learned that the Jews got so fed up with Paul that they hauled him before the proconsul, whose name is Gallio. And from Roman records and archaeological evidence, we've got him dated, which gives a date for when Paul was in Corinth, but also shows Luke's ability as a historian. He gets a lot of these titles right, names right, of places that Paul visited. So he had sources for that, I guess. And sometimes he was with Paul, of course. So this is the bema up here, and this is where the proconsul would have sat, and probably Paul and Sosthenes, the Jewish leader, were down here, and proconsul threw the case out of court right away. And the people in the synagogue were really bad, and they beat the Jewish leader up, according to Acts. So anyway, and this is the view from the top. I'm standing on the top of the bema looking down at where the crowd would have been in that court hearing, which didn't last very long, evidently. So more of the excavations here in Corinth. You can see the mountains up there where the temple was with all the prostitutes. And the sailors, of course, loved that, and they behaved like sailors. So Corinth was a pretty rough town. And then we in the museum, we looked at a lot of things that had been dug up and displayed. Here's a tile work that was found and still pretty well preserved. And this is a column with menorahs on it, which is another evidence that there was a synagogue in Corinth, which, of course, they said in Acts that there was, and this looks like it came from the synagogue. Then we stopped for lunch at a Greek restaurant, and we drove in the bus back to Athens. And here's the Acropolis. That's the Parthenon up above there. And you could hike up to that, and we did. But we came to Mars Hill, where Paul gave his speech to the intelligentsia. And here is the speech quoted from the Bible in Greek. But we read it in English. Everywhere we went, we read those passages and remember what happened there. So here's Elizabeth and I on the top, looking around. And here's a view of what Athens looks like today. People standing on top of the hill, taking pictures, acting like tourists. They are tourists. So a lot of different nationalities and people are there. There's some of the Athens, modern Athens, as the camera keeps panning. So everybody's got a camera, or everybody's taking pictures. Okay. So we hiked up the hill to get to the Parthenon, and they were working on it, but that's the Parthenon. I hope with the work on it, it looks even better today than it did then. Now, Patty Weiser's husband, when he was in the Navy before they were married, had been to Greece when they were sailing, and they took a picture in front of the Parthenon. So Patty wanted to duplicate that picture with her friends. There's Paula and Clarine and Patty, and they posed exactly the way the guys did, in the same arms resting, legs apart, leg up on a knee, that kind of thing. So it was an interesting thing we did there. And this is still looking down from the Parthenon, looking at the modern city of Athens. And this is the modern stadium where some Olympic events are held. And we did stop there and see it. Of course, it's a lot different from the Olympia that we saw earlier. So here we are now with Olympia, and we're going to go to Ephesus now. So here's the ship sailing around up to Athens, went over to Kudasi, where Ephesus is, and then finally up to Istanbul. Now, here's Kusadasi, I think is the way they were pronouncing it, the port as we came in. And we first went to Miletus, and this is where Paul said farewell to the Ephesians elders. It was just outside of Ephesus. And since they'd had a big riot, he didn't want to go back into Ephesus at that point. But he said goodbye, and they all begged him not to go to Jerusalem, but he was determined to go. And of course, we know at that point he was arrested and sent to Rome for trial. So we had our worship there. I guess this must have been Sunday. And we worshiped there and had communion sitting in that amphitheater. And we found a number of amphitheaters that were still very usable. And the Romans knew how to build them in exactly the right curvature so that the sound echoed in there and you could hear very well. You hear what everyone was saying. So this is the amphitheater there, a view of it. And now we're on our way to Ephesus. It looks like cotton, I think, and some modern apartments. This is a place where we stopped where they made carpets, and we got to see that done. And Elizabeth and I actually bought a carpet and had it shipped. We still have it. And of course we had lunch there. So that was our morning. Now we came to Ephesus, and here's our guide again with the flagpole orientating us. We went up the top and hiked down. So the bus met us on the other side. So some of the ruins of Ephesus. This is the Temple of Domitian. This is the main pathway or main road down through Ephesus. And there would have been a lot of little shops along here. And Paul may have had a tent maker's shop in that area and talked to people as they stopped to look at his wares. A Temple of Trajan that you see there. Temple of Hadrian. Although Hadrian comes much later, and I don't think it would have been there in the time of Hadrian or in time of Paul. Now, this was interesting. They showed us these diagrams or artwork that was scratched into the ground near the shops. And they said that those were actually Christian symbols that people would have recognized if they were Christian, which is like the fish symbol, which is in Greek is Jesus Christ, God's Son, Savior. And that is the Greek word for fish. So you'll see that symbol too. But they thought, and what they said was if a Roman guard or someone questioned what it was, they would say, oh, that's just a game we play when we don't have customers. And a lot of ruins around, a lot of cats. A lot of our people really like the cats. Now this is where the library is, and it's just behind the library is the Colosseum that holds 24,000 people. And this was built in the time of Paul.
This place held 24,000 people.
Mm-hmm. There's a group over there having a worship service, it looks like.
Oh, you want to come?
Are you one of the 24,000?
We don't want to stick in line with all those people. And be sure to bring your lunch.
And down here is where the lions came from.
And of course, that's where they had the big riot protesting the way that Paul's preaching cut into the silver trade for souvenirs of Artemis. So this was leaving at night, very pretty scene. And in the morning, we came to Istanbul in Turkey, and I'm not positive which is which. One is the Blue Mosque and the other one is Hagia Sophia. This may be Hagia, but I'm not sure. We'll see it up close a little later on. And it's kind of lost in the fog back there is a bridge, and that bridge is Asia in Europe. Actually, our ship docked in Europe, and we took the bus to Asia to see the town of Istanbul. And so and a lot of traffic through this is the Dardanelles. And so anyway, we're on our way in the bus, and there's a train running down through the center. And we went into a palace that had been used by the harems and all the Turkish sultans, or I forget what they called them right now. Anyway, there's some of our group. And we saw the spice market. A lot of good things, a lot of shopping to do there. So And this is the Blue Mosque. We went in there and saw that. Very, very beautiful. Had to take your shoes off, as it's always done in a mosque. And here's the Hagia Sophia, or Holy Wisdom. And that was the cathedral that was a Christian church. At this point, it had been turned into a museum by the Turkish government, but now I understand that they've turned it back into a mosque, because after the Muslims took over, they made the church into a mosque, and then the secular government of Turkey made it a museum, and now I understand they've turned it back into a mosque. So a lot of artwork, a lot of interesting things inside there. Various artwork in there, very beautiful inside. Looking down through there, through the balcony. Then we went to the Grand Bazaar. It was easy to get lost in here. They told us that we should take a picture of the exit when we go in. So if we got lost, we could show that to someone on our camera and say, where is this? So you go back out the same place you went in. So then this is the Dardanelles, a lot of traffic through there. There's a freighter going through and tour boats and whatnot going around, very busy. And we were docked right near that. This picture from our ship. And then we spent 2 days at sea going back to Naples, and we retraced our route quite a bit at that point. But then our group got together for dinner one night, so it was a good time. And here we are now. We've come to Naples, Italy. When we went to Pompeii, this was the town that was destroyed by the volcano. This is the Mount Vesuvius over here, and it filled this whole thing up with ash. And actually, this is one of the best preserved cities. Paul never went here, but it said it'd be very typical of cities that Paul would have visited. So, but the walls are preserved by the ash. Although the roofs were mostly wood, and most of those got burned up. So anyway, get a better idea of what the city was like. And this is inside one of the villas. You notice a big open area in the center where they could do laundry and stuff like that. And usually most of the households had a job, like who was it? Lydia in Philippi. Was a dealer in purple goods, and probably her household would have dyeing vats and things like that, what they needed out here for that. But you could also see how you could have a worship service in here very easily, gathering people together for a worship service as the church got started. The street, what it looked like. Some more area, well, probably an open area or something there. And then as we left, we went past some modern apartment buildings. There's another view of Naples. And we left there at night. And we came back to Rome then from Naples. And this is the Tiber River, which flows through Rome. This is our guide at Vatican City. So we went in there, and a lot of artwork, a lot of very interesting stuff. Beautiful ceiling there. And everyone's, of course, taking pictures and that. Now, we went into the Sistine Chapel. You're not allowed to take pictures. You're not even allowed to talk. And this is a painting or picture of the center of that painting that's so familiar that I got off the internet. I didn't take this. I didn't sneak my camera in there and take that. So it was very quiet, very reverent. I found it easiest, there were benches along the side, and I found it easiest to sit down on the bench and then look up, because if I stood in the center and put my head back to look up, I started getting dizzy for whatever reason. So it's very beautiful. And then this is St. Peter's Cathedral. And anyway, we went in there. You can't walk in the center, but you go down on the sides and see it all. And it's very ornate, very elaborate. And this is looking outside to the square about in front of St. Peter's. And this is where the people gather if the Pope is going to speak. And you see that window in the center with the balcony. That's where he spoke from. He didn't come out and greet us for whatever reason, but thought he might, but he didn't. But that's what you see in the news a lot when the Pope is speaking, that window with the balcony. And we had a lunch there at a sidewalk cafe. Enjoyed that. Very pleasant weather. This is November, but it wasn't very cold at all. And then in Rome, we went to St. Paul's outside the walls. This is in memory of the Apostle Paul, supposedly on the site where he was executed. And here the paintings of him and his life, and a statue of him in the church. And the church looks like this inside, and all of these little round things here, all the popes that have ever been are on there, one for each pope, and quite a few by now. So we did tour some of ancient Rome. This is the Colosseum outside. And we went inside, of course, and the floor of the Colosseum is missing, and there were various rooms down here. Sometimes they kept animals in here to push them up through a trap door, or various things that they did, or had gladiator battles and things like that. So this is looking over the edge. I think that's the Constantinian Arch there near the Colosseum, by the Emperor Constantine, who was the first one to become a Christian, first Christian emperor. And here's a view of the Colosseum. There are crosses around there, and people get the idea that these were martyrs who were crucified under Nero. The only problem with that is that the Colosseum was built after Nero's time. So Nero didn't crucify anybody here. But there were Christians becoming martyrs here, and that remembers that, thrown to the lions and things like that. This is the Forum. This was many temples and a place to meet people and greet them and talk to them, and business being conducted and whatnot. It had been very busy at one time. And a street there in Rome. There's a McDonald's over there. And here's some of our group. I asked our guide, these guys were trying to sell things, and they were really persistent. And I found if you said no thank you, that they followed you even more. And so you notice all our group is very well ignoring him. I don't know what he was selling, but that was a constant feature of where we went. Now, this is the Pantheon, which was a pagan temple to many gods. And it was turned, of course, into a Christian church. And this is the inside now. It's round. And I'll take the camera all the way around so you can get a feel for what it looks like. And of course, a lot of people. Beautiful tiles on the floor. Again, here you want to look up. Okay, there's some of the tiles on the floor, marble. Very beautiful. Now we stepped outside and we saw these signs, Putin, go home. And when I checked my dates, Putin had illegally annexed Crimea that year in 2014, and about March, I think it was, and we were there in November. And I don't know if these were Ukrainians or who they were, but they were protesting the Ukraine war. And, I thought, that's interesting that I got that in here when we hadn't heard much about Ukraine up until more recently. So it's a fountain over here, Elizabeth smiling, and a plaza in Rome. What's the river? Oh gosh,
I think that's the Tiber River, Bob.
Tiber. Okay, thank you. Memory slip. And we got on the plane and we went home, and that was our trip.